Welcome to the Healers Podcast, where we inspire and guide healers through business expansion. We give voice to incredibly abundant healers to share their stories. We dive into the quantum field to unlock the energies of conscious creation. We also develop digital tools to help you grow, which you can find on healless.com. I'm your host, Yuli, and I'm grateful you chose to join this space. Now let's go deep. Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another amazing, inspiring episode of the Healers Podcast. Today we have Kellie Walsh, and we're talking about merging creative arts and spirituality. So I'm super excited to introduce Kellie. She's a visionary who has masterfully combined creative arts and spirituality into a unique and transformative career path. As the founder of Divine Hive, Kellie merges her talents as a professional photographer with her deep spiritual insight to guide individuals on their journeys of self-discovery and healing. Kellie's approach blends intuitive guidance, energy healing, and the creation of soul portraits, unique visual representations of her clients' inner transformations. I love this so much, and so amazing to have you here. And to set intention for this episode, I really feel deeply the moment we spoke, I felt this urge to introduce our audience to what you do, because I have a feeling there's a lot of creatives out there that are sitting in their seats with their screens in front of them and really contemplating how can they bring together their spirituality and creative arts. And you've done it, my friend. So I do hope to inspire a lot of our listeners. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh my God, thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. And this is kind of like a continuation of a previous dialogue that we had on a personal level. But I think it's so important to discuss, our merging of our creativity and our spirituality and what we do. I feel like our paths, our creativity is a spiritual path, and there really doesn't have to be a separation, but we often do that in our own minds and our own lives. So I really am so excited to be here and to help people navigate and to find that's, destination, that place to bring the two worlds together, to feel completely whole in what they do and who they want to be.
So true. So true. So just as we're diving in, can you just start by outlining what is from your experience, you saw as kind of like someone who combined both? What are the similar patterns that you're seeing? What was the aha moments that you realized, like, oh, actually my creative work is spiritual work, and vice versa?
I mean, there was really actually a very definitive, pivotal moment. I have been, on the spiritual path my whole life. I mean, I don't even want to tell people, I started writing morning pages from reading The Artist's Way many years ago. So in 1998, I started doing morning pages, and don't do the math. It was a long time ago. And, that allowing, like she says in the book, releasing that inner critic and working through like writing as a way to connect to that inspirational spiritual mindset was such a game changer for me. So for the longest time I did this, and it was very private. It was on my own. And I had a very strong spiritual path of meditating, going to workshops. But then probably about maybe 7 years ago, this woman who's a channeler who I really respect, and she does privates and she does one-on-one. And she said to me, well, you're a channeler, and what you do, you receive a lot of information and downloads. And she was the one that put the seed in. What you do as a photographer is the same as the intuitive downloads you receive as a channeler. Because I always considered myself a seer as a channeler. Like I could see timelines. I can, when I receive downloads and information, it's not so much that I actually can see them or hear them. It's more a clear cognitive aspect where it's a real deep knowing. But like I also felt myself as a seer, and I often call myself a seer in the spiritual world. And then it was like, hello, I'm a photographer. Of course I'm a seer, So, I mean, I think after that first, that one-on-one with her, she really put, even maybe deep down inside, I always knew what I was doing was spiritual. At that point, I no longer separated them. It was almost like my coming out party. Like
Mhm.
people in my, people in my photography world, which I kept very private from my spiritual world, I started to merge them together.
So what was that process like? Because I'm always curious when people have those deep moments of understanding, something that really shifts their perspective and puts them in a different box in a different plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you still have your old identity and this incredibly successful career going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you some people go back and start questioning, of course, and some people find ways like yourself to transform it and elevate that craft as well. But what was that process like for you?
Well, I think it's interesting because I come from a creative field, and so it was kind of an easy segue for me to become, taking my spiritual approach to my photographic process. When I started to do not so much, weddings, which I did a lot of, but even weddings, when I would get to a place, or if I did a portrait session, I would have them have tea with me and be in a meditative state before we started to have them, they didn't really know what I was doing. I was creating, and I would ask them what their intention was. And I would ask them how are they feeling? I didn't ever want somebody to run into my studio. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late, and jump into the shoot. I wanted them to be that sense. So I think the first thing was the mindset of the intention, bringing the intention that you always have in your spiritual work and your path, and the dialogue, the way you speak, the way you move, your energy, bringing that into what I did for my human job, my humaning aspect of my life. So I started subtly at first by doing stuff like that. And then another thing too is I wasn't afraid any longer to separate them. I wasn't afraid to tell people about my spiritual path. I wasn't, when I would come into a job, they're like, oh, you're so calm. You have such an ease about you. And I'm like, well, this is what I do. And this is part of what brings that creativity and that joy to the photo world, to the photographic world that I was merging together. So I think that for the longest time, people that especially my commercial clients, they didn't know about my meditations, that I'm a channeler. I speak to galactic aliens, and I'm a channeler. Can you believe that? I mean, I don't know if they would harm me back again. But after a while, I was like, I don't care. That's who I am. This is a part that feeds me. That feeds me to be able to be the best photographer I can be. To be able to not just to be able to see what my clients needs, but also understand and put a set of intention in there. So it was everything's about energy. And, you can't think energy. You have to always feel energy, right? So going from that thinking mind to that feeling heart, that kind of switch energetically is what I did as I started bringing my spiritual approach to my professional life. I mean, a lot of people too, I think it's sometimes easier when you're in the creative world to be able to slowly merge those. But I think you can be whatever you do. You can be an accountant, you can be a banker, you can work in Wall Street, anything that you do, you can bring that mindset. For us in the creative worlds, it's a little bit easier, I think, because we're already using that intuitive left side of our brain. We're going back and forth and being able to view and see the world in a very kind of fluid way for creatives. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you felt naturally to kind of start bringing into your work because, like you're right, people in this industry a little more receptive. But I wonder if you had any stories or any examples how you integrate something or you really did something bold, maybe that you wouldn't dare before, and what was the outcome?
Well, one little subtle thing I did was I started, all my crystals and jewelries, I would always wear them now, no matter what job I did. So people that was people would ask me, they would stop and oh my God, what is that? And I would say, oh, it's a selenite crystal, or it's this. And then oh, why do you wear them? I'm like, well, part of it is I believe there's a consciousness of the crystals that can help influence us, that we can, or even as a talisman, it's something that you can hold on if you're feeling stressed. So that would be when I started, I work a lot for New York Presbyterian Hospital, and I shoot all their high-end events. So I started changing my wardrobe a little bit by just adding all these pieces. That's a very subtle thing that I did. but like it was an intention because I knew it would start a conversation with people that would never even be open to that. And putting a little seed into somebody and, like, oh, consciousness of crystals? What does that mean?
That is amazing. I love this kind of cocktail conversation starter.
Exactly. I think it's really, and that's a very easy way to do that. Like I'm trying to think of any other way that I love that cocktail conversation that you just said. That's very interesting, but it is definitely a way to get people to be engaged.
I think especially in the New York scene, right? We both kind of coming from that scene when everyone is so like agenda driven, right?
Oh yeah.
And you come in with your crystals. It's a different, suddenly the conversation shifts.
Exactly. And because people are curious, when they see something or experience something that they're not, especially like you said in New York and working for like for example, the hospitals and some of my other big clients, they have an agenda. They have this idea that they have to complete something that they're goal driven. And because they're so goal driven, they often get caught in that looping, right? That mental looping. And all of a sudden somebody or something just kind of stops that. It stops that neuroplasticity of a brain, like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, Dr. Joe, wires together, right? So like,
yes,
it stopped that kind of looping of our mental thoughts and really to get people, especially in any kind of profession, out of that kind of mental prison, if you would say, that kind of head first instead of heart first. It should be heart first.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned my favorite teacher. So we have to talk about that because I feel like I just came back from a retreat.
I know. I want to hear a lot
about, and I probably should record another episode, but one of the fascinating meditations we did is his new walking meditation. It's called Changing Boxes. And he had that seated meditation version for a long time. It's one of his most popular ones that really changes people's neuroplasticity, like you said. But the walking meditation was really incredible because the way he does it, you start with your eyes closed, and then slowly when you open your eyes, eventually you feel like you're in another box, you're in another dimension. And it was just such a fascinating experience. And, walking out there with 1,800 people doing it together, and we all open our eyes in a different plane. I can definitely feel kind of like everything you're talking about. And I also love this idea as I'm stepping more on this journey to kind of not in a way to challenge people that I interact with, especially people not from this world, but open up their box and potentially introduce another box, right? Well, there's other planes that exist, that those rules that you live by, they just don't exist there.
Right.
And it's always so fascinating to watch kind of like people, shift and get curious, and some cells change in those conversations for sure. So I love that you do that. And then you took it even a step further at some point, and I want to talk about that because I think the moment I saw your website and I saw what you do, and then you call it soul portraits, I was just, yes, This is so genius because I think a lot of us, and it all comes down, and I'm sure you have the whole science behind it, like our own perception and our own external image and the pressures that come with it. And your process is kind of completely different, and how you manage to combine both, eventually giving, as a photographer, giving your client that product that they came for, right? That image that they desire, but also combine that with that internal transformation, potentially come up with something that is really their true essence. Because I think a lot of us these days, and then in the day what we're going through, it's this process of like peeling off and uncovering our true nature, because our true nature is divine, right? And all those layers that we built on top and we're born with. Well, actually, we're not always born with, but you get it. So talk about that process, how wearing crystals to a cocktail party is fun, but then how do you take that and really say, okay, I'm ready to transform those people?
Well, I think that, okay, I think we'll talk about it in two ways. First, kind of more in a general, like say I'm working an event or a commercial job or something that is more of a group setting. And then something that then bringing it into the studio where it's more a private, like one-on-one, like the soul portrait. And because there's, those two avenues of how I work, and how I've started to bring my spiritual approach to everything that I do, because we are living vessels of the divine. Everything that we do in this physical body is for the experience of the divine to have form. And so everything that we do is divine. Everything we do is spiritual. We have put the box around what is spiritual and what isn't spiritual. So if we first can take away the idea that, like I say, I'll go back to the accountant, he's a spiritual being, right? Even the guy on Wall Street, deep down, he is a spiritual being. He is a part of God, and we need to see that and reflect that. But we just need to have him look and change the shape of his box. I love the box thing. They just told me I'm going to have to use it all the time. It's great. I'm going to give you an example of something that's really interesting. I'm shooting a wedding, and weddings are so stressful. You try to be that kind of, you try to I'm not going to say spiritual being because I just said we are spiritual beings. That is our innate nature. But we get clouded with our own expectations of what we think define us, right? And the pressures of a wedding photography. I'm shooting somebody's wedding. There's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of things that I need to create for these people to capture those moments. So we're late running to this church, and we were doing all the family pictures first. And we all come running into the church. And it's this big, I don't know, Episcopalian, I think, a Methodist church in New York City with a lot of rules and a lot of regulations. So we're all running in. And the woman that was in charge of, I guess, the church, she comes up to me and she starts yelling at me. And she starts in my face saying, you're late. You can't come here. You can't do that. And just literally in my face. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I'm like, okay, is spiritual Kellie going to be here, or is Kellie from Worcester going to come here? But, so I had to I really had to and it's a daily practice in everything you do, because we do have one foot in one world and one foot in another world often, right? That's our life right now. That's being human. We have to experience that. So I took a deep breath and, instead of reacting and being triggered, how dare you? Don't you know who I am? And I'm trying to hear, I'm here for the bride and groom. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to make their, this experience great for them so we can capture beautiful imagery, but not stress them out. So I had to take a deep, deep breath, and I'm thinking, I'm going to shift her. I don't know if you know what this is. Mm-hmm. I'm going to shift her. So instead of reacting, my eyes, and I said to myself, I don't even know what the woman's name was. I would like to speak to this woman's higher self. I would like to be able to connect to something that is not in this physical incarnation, within this box of what she fit between us. I would like it to go away. I would like her to understand that we both want the same things, that we want this bride and groom to have the best experience of their life. We're just coming from it from different points. And so I just closed my eyes, and then the wedding started. It was a long hour mass. And then during the middle of the ceremony, she comes up to me. She's like, hey, if you want to move closer, go ahead. It's okay. I'm like, oh, really? And then she's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And then later on, she's like, you know what? When you're walking backwards and taking pictures, I'm going to stay behind you so you don't fall.
That is incredible.
I was like, okay.
I love this story so much. The shifting. Yes.
That's the shift. So I think, you got the cocktail conversation with the crystals, and then you have your own ability to shift by going into your heart and trying to connect to the person's higher self, the person's that self that's not tethered to their ego and their physicality, right? And I just say that because I've tried that with other people and all that, but that was the most profound experience I've ever had in my life in regards to that. We're so human, and we're always going to be triggered. I always say that healing is when you realize you're triggered, right? And the amount of time that awareness happens, and then the amount of time where you can let it go. When that time becomes shorter and shorter, where maybe it's only like 30 seconds, you're like, oh, triggered. Okay. Well, I'm going to come into here, always coming into the heart. So that, I think when I had that experience with that woman at that church during a big wedding in New York City, I realized that my spiritual path could be simply always being present within my higher self, within that heart-centered flame, no matter where I go and what I do as a career. Like, that's a simple thing to do for anybody to start. Like, play around with that, see how you feel. Everything's about how you feel. I can't really emphasize how much it is to be in that hot space. And then,
it's just, I just want to take a pause on that because it's, first of all, such a beautiful story and also really amazing lesson. And really, I think if anyone can take like one takeaway from this conversation is your title doesn't need to be a spiritual healer to do the work we need to do.
It's exactly. I think it's like that phrase, an urban monk, it's like be on the mountain and have that committed spiritual life, which is so important, but be in the trenches, be in it.
Be a wedding photographer in New York City.
Yeah, exactly.
Mindset.
Exactly. Where you're dealing with a lot of personalities and a lot. So I really use that as the gold standard of when I'm being triggered. When I work for New York Presbyterian Hospital, I love all of them, but it's a very high stress environment with the people that are organizing everything. So I literally, on the way down to the job, will start feeling their stress in my stomach. I'll be going, oh no. I can feel the anxiety. I can feel that because I think the more you do it, it's like a muscle, right? It becomes stronger because it becomes more intuitive. So as soon as I get in there, I take a deep breath and then I go up to everybody and I look them in the eyes. I'm like, how's it going? And I talk to them in that kind of meditative voice a little bit, a lot of pauses in between the words, lowering the octave. And they might even for a second just stop, but it's that interruption.
I love those little interventions and I wish I had you because I used to run those 500 people events in the city in my previous chapter. And it's funny because I used to get so stressed and it doesn't matter how much, I would relax or meditate before or whatever I try to do. You just get into that stress ball zone that you're discovering. And I wish, first of all, that I had you by my side to intervene. But and the way, I started looking at it as this is my exercise I'm going to continue doing those events until the point that I can completely relax and completely surrender to the experience and know that everything is just going to go just as it's planned, just as it's supposed to be. And I do not need to sacrifice my own, well-being or my own peace to achieve that. So, speaking of which, I'm in the midst of organizing another big event with 200 healers, as you know. So I really look at it I'm actually looking forward to that as an opportunity to put myself in a new box. Yeah. And see, can I do that without having all that stress and all those feelings? So thanks for reminding that because I can so relate to that.
Well, it's a practice. That's a practice. It's a spiritual practice, just what you did. Being if people, even in the corporate world, if they could get some instruction or some kind of guidance to know that they're going to be stressed, they have a lot of pressure on them, but it's an exercise of how you can come from a space of honoring yourself because that stress is not good for you. It's going to wreak havoc to your body. And then just the energy that you put out it's like a ripple. It's going to create anxiety and stress. And it's also an exercise on faith and trust. Especially, you could plan the best event, everything be perfect, but something can happen that and you have to understand that to be in the flow of the divine is to be in a place of no expectations and no agenda. Such a hard thing to put that into practice when you're in the corporate America, right? Because that's all corporate America is all about, right? So, I said, wouldn't it be amazing if like CEOs comes up to you and says to a meeting, I have no agenda. I have no expectations of you. I just want you to do the best that you can. That's all I want from you. Wouldn't that be an amazing way that you can shift an energy in a whole corporation office? And then because I've always seen it a little bit different. When I was in college, I, worked for a corporate owned restaurant, and they had all these rules that I thought were not beneficial or good. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make no sense to me. And literally I was fired the next day. So, so keep thinking outside the box, keep being a seer, and stay true to yourself and understand that. I mean, that's the way you can take whatever profession you are and make it your spiritual practice. Okay. If you want to completely, and I don't, and two, like a lot of people think like, I want to stop being an accountant. I'm sorry, I keep talking about accountants, but it comes to my mind, or whatever you're doing for a 9 to 5 and completely go into the healing arts. That's a big jump of faith. And you can, like I said, you always have that spiritual practice. So you don't have to think all or nothing, one or the other. You can do a blend until you feel comfortable to the right opportunities come to you. Because I think, the biggest problem we can have in the world is that spiritual egotism. That is.
Yes, absolutely.
I just was writing about that before we had this call. And, it's often like ego finds its way really, and I'm not going to give ego a completely bad rap because I respect that ego has kept us safe when we were younger, but it's an untethered ego that you need to watch out. And a spiritual egotism is like, what is my mission on earth? But it's like that energy behind it. Your mission on earth is be a flow of divine. Whatever you do, every step you take is divine, is spiritual. If you find that you're a Reiki healer or you have these other gifts, you're a channeler and you want to expand in them, that's beautiful. But wait for the flow of the divine to show you the way. It's that trusting in that divine feminine energy.
That's an amazing advice. And first of all, two things I wanted to point out is one, the idea of, spiritual superiority, and the whole division between like the spiritual, non-spiritual world. I completely agree with you. It's all made up labels, just the same labels that we use in the 3D world. But I also, just to inspire some accountants among our listeners, like I know so many amazing people in the finance and accounting industry that are moving to work with, like whether it's conscious businesses or holistic clients, and they love that because they find that fulfillment of keeping their trade and the profession and the skills that they've gained over the years, and just finding clients that are more aligned with their current state, that is maybe a little more awakened. So I think there's like a lot of room, and I'm always excited when I meet those people from industries that's supposed to be opposite of what we do, right? But they have that side. It's just such a refreshing.
It is.
And we need more people. We need more people on Wall Street who understand healing arts.
Oh yeah. So true. Let's not even go about politics. That's another thing. But yes, it's so true. And it's like, and it's also, you have to think about, it's all about, talk about twin flames, right? What is a twin flame? And really it is having that feminine, and I think we are all our true twin flame. Like to try to find a twin flame outside of yourself, I think has been hijacked a bit. I think the real true concept of that is having the relationship, the marriage within of yourself, of the divine feminine aspect and the divine masculine. So having somebody that can help you with your website, with your accounting, with all that has those skills, and you have such strong intuitive skills, and you come together, that's a divine union. Divine union doesn't have to be sexual, doesn't have to be physical, right? Divine union is coming together to create the best possible expansion for both people.
Love this so much. Another deep pause and deep breath, and just enjoying this metaphor so much. And speaking of divine union, let's finally talk about your soul portraits.
Yes. So after I had that conversation with the woman that was a channeler who told me about that, I really sat down and said, how can I really merge my love of photography, my love of photographing people, and my abilities to channel and to connect and to see beyond kind of this three-dimensional world, right? So I started to play around with the idea of soul portraits and what that would look like. And on the last few retreats I've had, I've actually incorporated the soul portraits at the end of the retreat. And it's interesting what I really have come to understand. And I actually have found a beautiful way of combining them. And what I do is we usually do an oracle. Usually I tell the person who signs up for a soul portrait, do not have an agenda. Do not have an expectation. Do not think that you're going to use this for your LinkedIn headshot, because this is not that. You come here because you want to see your true divine state. You want to have, it's almost like I'm witnessing the unfolding of you beneath the skin in a way. So usually I will tune into the person. I will get like a message, a place or a meditation. When I do my guided meditations, it's really remote viewing. I can remote view, if you know what that is. It's an ability to see other timelines, other dimensions, be able to go there. So that's how I do my guided meditations. I will like remote view and take them on a journey with me of what I see. So that's kind of what I've been doing with the soul portraits. So if you sit down with me, I'll get an idea. Say, for instance, the last one there's two I just did recently that were pretty amazing. This one gentleman, I just know him prior, so I know he has a very elven energy, very Merlin energy, even in his appearance right now. He's a healer. So I knew where I was going to take him when he pulled the card. So I have people pull a card first, an oracle card, and that usually will give me confirmation where I want to go. So with him, he of course got the Elven Council as his card. So I'm like, okay, let's go there. So we did. I took him to the journey to like the Crystal City of Light. Whatever I saw, I took him to this where we came together. And it's a short meditation, 20 minutes. And we just sat there and he received information and he actually started speaking light language. That's something he's been trying to achieve. And then after the meditation and we came back, I took his photos, At first, I've learned now after doing for a couple of years that I wait till they come out of the meditation first before I start shooting, because most people are totally out, like their mouths are hanging and their heads to the side, they look like they've been in a deep sleep for about an hour. So I wait till they come out to a certain point and then I start photographing them. And I kind of just, I just give, lead them a little bit with, I usually put them in a place where I can get some beautiful light on them. And just, another person, this guy, Scott, who's a chiropractor, he pulled the owl card. So I knew I was going to take him to a place where he could have that freedom with his wings. Like that's what I felt he needed. I felt like he was very stuck. So afterwards I took these beautiful shots with his hands in black and white. And it was so beautiful, So later on they would have that photograph, or I usually give them the whole series of photographs as kind of a talisman, like a representation of, so I always say, print it, put it on your altar, have it as a reminder, of the story, So most of the meditations will be something that somebody's working through, or maybe, one woman I took to Lemuria, and I actually gave her and Scott a name. They received a name that I channeled for them. So they can use the name for themselves or write it down, or I usually will write their name on the photograph that comes to it. And that's the soul portraits.
Wow, that is incredible. As you were talking, I'm like, I have to have one. I have to have this session with you. It just sounds so special. And I love the idea that you're capturing that moment, because I think a lot of us have these beautiful moments in meditation and then you kind of come out of it and it's gone. I mean, you can journal and you can try to kind of write it, but just to capture that, I think it's just a beautiful gift.
Yes, it really is. And it is. That's why the photograph can be so powerful, because it can take you back to that memory. It can take you back to your remembering, I think that, journaling is so important. I'm a big journaler and I think that combination of coming out of meditations and And then also too, when everything's done, we'll put some music on and do a little dancing. Just to get the energy moving, So that's kind of been the sequence of how I've fine-tuned the soul portraits, because has been kind of a work, I'm working out the logistics of how to combine the two, because, usually my healing arts is group meditations where we go and, I just finished a series where we did the chakras with the inner dimensions of the earth. So each chakra was represented, the first dimension was the root chakra, the second dimension was the sacral. So I just finished the whole series of that, but that's very much group setting, So for me to make that experience into a one-on-one and then combine it with a portrait session was, a work in progress. But I think pretty much fine-tuned it, and I'm very excited about what I've been doing lately. So
this is a very special thing that you're doing, and I hope more people get to experience that, because all of us deserve a soul portrait. I think there's way too many headshots, and now with AI headshots that floating around.
I see that. I'm like, oh, that's the end of our careers, end of our professions right there.
No, I think this is the beginning of the boom of the soul portrait.
No, it's the beginning of the soul portraits.
Yes, because AI will never be able to do what you do. I have absolutely no doubt in that.
Yeah, no, I'm so thrilled that my journey has led me here, because I love doing soul portraits. If I can just, moving forward, if I could be blessed enough to be able to do the soul portraits, do my guided meditations and retreats, I would have a blessed life. I spent years, I've been a photographer since I was 18. So I spent years in the trenches doing lots of work. I can't even tell you how 600 weddings, maybe lots of weddings, and a lot of commercial work, fashion work. I was, shot a lot in the fashion industry, and that's a whole different set of issues and personalities, as you say. But even when I still shoot fashion now, I come in with, I'm going to shift people. I'm going to take this and make this an elevated experience, because that's what we can do as healers,
Amazing. I love what you do, and I just love the idea of having you in those industries still and shifting people and elevating wherever you go. So it's just truly inspiring. And I know a lot of our listeners are listening to you, could relate to a lot of those stories, and maybe you open some of the horizons and introduce some new boxes that they can try. So as we coming up to the end, I can't believe it. Do you have any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
I think that the biggest thing that prevents people from expanding and moving outside their box that they feel very comfortable in is fear, right? Was that false evidence appearing true? I think that's what they call fear, something like that. Yes, false evidence appearing real. That's it. So I think that if people can, in their own practice, try to start some kind of meditative practice. If they feel like they can't meditate, just focus on the breath, 10 minutes of just focusing on your breath, walking out in nature, and removing, any kind of self-created obstacles that they might find. Remove that fear, and take baby steps. Take baby steps, because baby steps builds that kind of synchronicity nerve or muscle. You start to have synchronicities. You start to think, you become a manifester, because you start doing those baby steps and say, I see myself doing this. I see my future as this, but I am not going to put an expectation or an agenda. I'm just going to be in a state of gratitude. This is Dr. Joe very much, right? Be in a state of gratitude and allow it to come to you, right? Allow whatever the future is to come to you for your best expression of your divinity, because when we move forward and try to grab onto something, that's very masculine. And it's also like saying that we don't have it now. It's that lack of mentality. And we're not going to receive it because we feel like we don't have it and we're grabbing onto it. But if we just can sit in a state of openness, and believe me, I'm triple 20, as they say, I'm 60. So it's taken me a long time to get to this point. And believe me, I have days where I'm 3 steps back, but then I just jump forward and go as far as I can, and just, be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself. We're all on this ride being human together. So that's what I have.
Absolutely. Well, I have lots of gratitude for guests like yourself who really inspire our listeners, inspire me, who show different paths that you can take and still be successful by the normal terms, shall we call them, right? But just create incredible impact and heal wherever you go, elevate, raise vibrations wherever you go. So I'm grateful for humans like yourself who walk on this planet, especially in New York City. We need you. Please continue to do what you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be on this. I'm so excited that we met, and I'm excited to see what our future is for us and the beautiful things you're going to be doing. And so thank you so much.